The situation in eastern Indonesia is that there's a very large and spectacular volcanic eruption going on. Began on Tuesday night. The name of the volcano is Ruang, Mount Ruang, which is also the name of the island which is formed by this volcano. And since Tuesday evening, there have been 5 significant sized eruptions there. A lot of earthquakes, very large amounts of ash and debris being expelled from this volcano right up into the air, miles up into the atmosphere, as well as lava flowing down the slopes and rocks being sprayed out from the volcano as far as a neighbouring island, which is a few kilometres offshore. And a lot of people are threatened by this. So the 800 or so inhabitants of the island have all been shipped off. They're also now having to evacuate many of the 20,000 people who live on the neighbouring island. And one of the big concerns is that accompanying these eruptions, of course, are earthquakes, that the earth is shaking. And because these are islands, they're surrounded by sea, this could very easily cause tsunamis, which could be driven out from the island, the volcano where this is happening, and smash into the neighbouring islands, potentially with great loss of life. Tagolandang has 20,000 people on it, roughly, and they're aiming to evacuate 11,000 who live along that side of the island, facing Mount Ruang, the volcano. I mean, there is no real upper limit to the size of earthquakes and tsunamis. I mean, to give you an idea, during a previous eruption of this volcano in 1871, an entire village on one side of the neighbouring island, Tagolandang, was wiped out with a great deal of loss of life. So, I mean, this is a real and potentially very lethal threat, and take it very seriously. I haven't seen any reports of deaths or serious injuries yet. I mean, there are rocks raining down on the neighbouring island, Tagolandang. Reports there of people have holes in their roofs from these bits of rock that are falling out of the sky. So it wouldn't be at all surprising if there were some injuries, but I don't think there's anything serious yet, at least none that have been reported. People on the ground, who have spoken to journalists are, reporting that there doesn't seem to be kind of panic or chaos. There's damage, being done to property, even on the neighbouring island. The people on the volcano itself, I think everyone's gone from there. But on Tagolandang, people are, it seems, following the evacuation orders. I mean, you'd have to be very stubborn or stupid, I think, to insist on staying put when all this stuff is raining down out of the sky. And you can see across the strait, I mean, it's not very far, spectacular images which have been broadcast around the world of this cloud of smoke and ash rising up, and then lightning bolts as well playing around it. It really does look, extremely impressive, almost apocalyptic. So, I mean, it's clear that something very dramatic and violent is happening, and I think people are taking it seriously.
These lightning bolts, is that linked to the eruption? Is that caused by the eruption, or is that just a coincidence?
Billions and billions, countless tiny particles of ash, which is hard matter. It's rock, pulverized rock, going up into the air, and it's something to do with the electrical capacity of all these particles that creates this lightning. So yeah, the lightning is not lightning coming out of storm clouds like we're used to. It's lightning created by this huge ash cloud. I mean, this stuff is going in. I saw at one point it was going up 2.5 miles into the air, but possibly even higher. So, I mean, it's really big, but Indonesia it's the most volcanic country in the world. It has 127 active volcanoes. And over the years, there have been absolutely massive eruptions, bigger still than this. One of the most famous was the explosion on another volcano island, Krakatoa, in 1883, which was so big, and the amount of matter expelled into the atmosphere was so great that it changed the weather around the world for several years. The following summer around the world, crops failed thousands of miles away, I mean, on other continents, because this cloud of ash had blocked out the sun, essentially. And for years afterwards, people in Europe, people who'd never even heard of this volcano, were reporting spectacularly beautiful, very red sunsets caused by this kind of film of ash that was filling the air across the earth. So, I mean, they can really be very consequential in their effects. I mean, Indonesia is a land of natural disasters. People will remember the 2004 tsunami that struck Sumatra, um, where it killed over 100,000 people. I mean, that was so massive, no one could handle that. Nobody would have been able to face that. But they have disaster agencies, they have rescue workers who are on standby to react to these kind of things because they can happen without warning. Indonesia is not a country where standards of building are particularly high. So in Japan, where I live, and also in Taiwan, where there was a big earthquake, of course, the other week, the modern buildings really are very strong and built to last. And if you're in a modern building and there's an earthquake, you don't really have to worry that much that it's going to collapse on your head. Generally, they don't; they stay up. In Indonesia, that's not always the case. The building codes are not so strict, the standards are not so high. But at the moment, the islands where this is taking place are fairly remote. They're sort of small places. So it's people living in kind of one-story buildings. There aren't any big cities with tall skyscrapers and so on. The other thing that's happened, by the way, is that the closest international airport at Manado, which is a city on the island of Sulawesi, not so far from the volcano, the Manado airport has closed down because one of the effects of an ash cloud like this is to jeopardize the engines of aircraft. So there was a very famous case in 1982 when a British Airways 747 was flying over another island in Indonesia, the island of Java, at 37,000 feet, and they weren't aware that below them a volcano was erupting, throwing up all this ash. And the Boeing 747 lost all four of its engines. They just went silent, and it was gliding slowly towards the Earth. The pilots didn't understand why this was happening or know what to do. And then it emerged from the cloud, and the engines started again one by one, and everyone was safe. So ever since that happened, pilots and airlines and airports have been extremely careful when there is volcanic ash in the air that they don't fly through it because it can have very nasty effects on engines.